welcome to the College of Complexes. My name's Don, and I'm going to be the moderator this evening. Our speaker tonight, today, of course, as some of you haven't checked your calendar, it's November 23rd, 2013. Yesterday was November 22nd, making it the 50th anniversary of the assassination of President John Kennedy.
By who?
Well, that's what we're here to discuss tonight, Charlie. Now, our speaker tonight is Dr. Cory Franklin. Title of this of the lecture: Who Needs Facts When You Have Conspiracy Theorists? He's going to be talking about the assassination of John F. Kennedy tonight. All right, then, without further ado, let's have a warm round of applause for our speaker tonight, Dr. Cory Franklin.
After those announcements, I should just give up, right? I don't know if I'm going to convince anybody, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk facts, and I'm going to talk logic, and I'm going to let you draw your own conclusions. And I don't know if anybody's going to change their mind, but you're going to hear the facts and the logic presented perhaps in ways that you haven't heard before. And I'd be happy to take all questions on and everybody who wants to say it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the three questions that the Warren Commission looked at systematically. I'm not going to defend the Warren Commission. I'm going to look at the questions they looked at. The questions that they had to address were: did Lee Harvey Oswald shoot John Kennedy? Was Lee Harvey Oswald part of the conspiracy? And was Jack Ruby part of the conspiracy to silence Lee Harvey Oswald? Those are the three questions that I'm going to address. Those are the things I'm sure we're going to be arguing about. And I'm going to start with the Zapruder film, but before I do, I might as well know what my audience thinks. So on the first question, how many people here think that Lee Harvey Oswald did not shoot John Kennedy? Okay. So we still have a lot of people who thought he shot John Kennedy. How many people think that if Lee Harvey Oswald did shoot John Kennedy, he was part of a conspiracy? Okay. And how many people here think that Jack Ruby was part of a conspiracy to silence Lee Harvey Oswald?
That I think.
Okay. No problem. What I'm going to do, you can't talk about this without looking at the Zapruder film. The print I'm going to show you is about 5 minutes long, and by the way, I want to thank Tim, Charles, Jeff, and everybody here for letting me speak. You guys took me aback without an introduction. And will I be able to stop it at about 2 minutes, Tim? This is, in my opinion, the best version of the Zapruder film. It's 5 minutes long. It's 5 separate versions of it. The last 3 are with the actual sprockets. It allows us the time spans. The first 2 times, spacebar time, okay. First 2 times I'm just going to have you look at it for the first 2 minutes, and then the last 3 I will ask you to address looking specifically at a couple of things. So here we'll start with the Zapruder film. It's not been doctored to my knowledge. This is the best copy that I know of. Is there sound, Tim?
I wasn't able to connect it.
Okay.
There is sound, but
Okay, it's not a problem.
Oh,
Now you'll see the same thing in slow-mo. It's tragic, isn't it? Even today, 50 years later. All right. Hopefully I'm going to stop it now.
Just hit the space bar.
Okay. The next 3 minutes will be 3 more versions of it, but they will be with the sprockets, with the actual frame by frame of that Zapruder put in there. And that's useful for timing and it's useful for reference. There will be 1 normal speed and there will be 2 slow motions, one with as much focus on Kennedy and Connally as possible. I would ask you to look at 2 things, actually 3 things. I would ask you to look at the timing. We can put 2 shots down on the film. 1 shot is at roughly frame 223, and the headshot is roughly at 313. So that's 90 frames between them. Every frame is an 1/18 of a second. So that means on the Zapruder film, there are 5 seconds between those 2 shots. When was the other shot? I don't want to use first, third, second. When was the other shot? No one knows for certain. No one knows for certain. It certainly wasn't after the headshot. Nobody would have shot after that. Was it between the 2 shots? Nobody can say. There is no evidence for that. The best guess that anybody has for the other shot is the first shot. It was about frame 160. If you could really look, you might be able to see Connally turn, but I don't think we can. But people heard it. Secret Service men changed. So that means there were 5 seconds between the last 2 shots, and most likely there was about 3.4 seconds between the first shot and the second shot. 8.4 seconds overall. Conspiracy theorists will narrow the time limit. People who don't believe it will widen it. But the best thing that we can say from here is he had to be, whoever shot had to be able to fire 2 shots in 5 seconds, 223 to 313. The third shot, probably the first shot, which didn't hit anybody, hit a curb, hit James T. in the eye across the street. Not the bullet, but the curb. 8.4 seconds. 2 shots in 5 seconds, not that hard to do for someone who's experienced. But, okay. The things I want you to look at in the next 3 minutes are, I want you to look at John Connally. I don't want you to look at John Kennedy so much at frame 223 or around then as John Connally. That is one of the ignored things about this film. And of course I want you to look at the headshot. And whereas people see different things there, what I'm going to do after we've seen that is I'm going to explain to you why what you've seen with what we know to be true will tell you that Lee Harvey Oswald shot the President of the United States. This is with the zapper thing at normal speed.
Yes. Can I take it?
Should be coming up in a minute.
Is it going? No?
It's playing.
Okay, there we go. .223. .313. Slow motion. Every frame is an 1/18 of a second.
Huh. Wow.
And the final time we'll see it, you will see the same thing you saw now with as much enhancement as possible focused on Connally and Kennedy. There may have already been a shot fired. Kennedy is hit there, as is Connolly.
Oh, shit. So shots were already fired.
That's our reference. You can turn that off, Tim, too. Is there
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, Jim.
First thing I want to ask you is, did you see that John Connolly was shot? Okay? Within frames, less than a second of when John Kennedy was shot. The first shot that hit John Connolly, the shot that hit John Connolly hit him in the back in the right armpit and came out his right nipple. Okay? So what I'm going to ask you is, where could John Connolly have been shot from? Now, he could not have been shot from the trestle overhead. No one shot them from the front. There were 12 people on the trestle, and there's a windshield. This is not the windshield. This is the front seat with a Secret Service man driver, and there is a windshield that protects them. No one shot them from the front. A Cuban agent was not on the trestle with a gun. He could not make that shot. Johnny Roselli was not in a sewer because of the windshield. No one could have shot from the front, and a shot could not hit John Connolly in the back armpit in the front. John Connolly could not have been hit in the back armpit from the side Nellie Connolly was protecting him. He could not have been hit from the side where Jackie Kennedy was protecting him. So there were only two places that John Connolly could have been hit from. One is the grassy knoll, which would be over here, and the other is from behind. But you can see that the way he's sitting, he could not have been shot in the armpit, gotten hit in the armpit and have it come out the right nipple, it did hit the right wrist and lodged in his left thigh from the grassy knoll, unless he turned this way. But you saw in the film that he did not turn that way. He turned this way. In other words, the shot that hit John Connolly could not have been from anywhere but the back. And if it was from the back, this is roughly a distance of 2 feet. That shot had to go through John Kennedy. It is the only place possible that the shot that hit John Connolly came from. And of course, that's the magic bullet. Now, there are a number of reasons it's not a magic bullet, okay? Because, people thought, well, it went this way and that, but it didn't. It would be a magic bullet if John Connolly was sitting right in front of John Kennedy at an even level. But even in this picture, you can see that they are not sitting at an even level. In point of fact, John Connolly is to the left and slightly down. As a matter of fact, John Connolly is taller than John Kennedy. But you don't see in the motorcade he ever looks taller than John Kennedy because he's down. When you line the shot up, you will see it goes right through Kennedy's back, right through Kennedy's throat, and the only place it can be, 2 feet, is hitting John Connolly. And that's what you saw in the Zapruder film. The shot that hit John Connolly, and by extension John Kennedy, the shot at 2:23 was from behind. That's all I'll say right now about that. Now we'll take the headshot. And everybody saw that, right? Everybody saw back and to the left. All of you saw back and to the left. But you know what nobody in this room saw? And I am 100% certain nobody in this room saw. And you know what that was? You didn't see the bullet hit John Kennedy. You know why you didn't see the bullet hit John Kennedy? Because no one has ever seen the bullet hit John Kennedy on that Zapruder film. Because that bullet, 3 ounces, about that big, was traveling at 1,200 miles an hour. I'm sorry, no one in the world has ever seen the bullet hit John Kennedy. What they see is, what they think they've seen is the bullet hitting John Kennedy. And if you'll permit me, what I will tell you is, I will take the liberty of telling you what you saw and then interpreting it. What you saw was a closed compartment under high pressure being hit by a high velocity missile and exploding at its weakest point. That's what we saw. closed compartment, high pressure, high velocity missile. We do not see where the high velocity missile came from. So this back and to the left is very well and good, but I'm going to give you 5 reasons now why the shot was not from the grassy knoll, as all the drugstore physicists tell you. In increasing order of impossibility to the last one. The first reason it didn't come from the grassy knoll is because within 1 minute, there were people all over the grassy knoll. They saw nobody there, they saw nobody get away, they saw nobody, with evidence of getting away, no rifle, no bullets, no shells, no smoke, no nothing. But you know what? That's not dispositive at all. Maybe it was a very clever assassin. But it's something to consider. Reason 2. There is a bullet hole in the back of John Kennedy's head. On the autopsy, there is a bullet hole. And in fact, most of the people, even conspiracy theorists and most autopsy people, will tell you there is a bullet in the back of John Kennedy's head. But people will argue that too. Reason number 3, you can't see it on the Zapruder film. But if you go frame by frame, and you go to frame 312, the one before the explosion, and you narrow it and close it very quickly, this was first done by the greatest physicist in America, Richard Feynman, in 1965. Robert Lifton, who, and I'm sure you have some conspiracy books by Robert Lifton, took it to Richard Feynman and said, would you please tell people that this is physically impossible? And Richard Feynman did an interesting thing. He said, I don't want to see that. I want to see frame by frame before that. And he looked at frame by frame before that, and indeed, there is a movement to the front when John Kennedy is initially hit. It's not very long, you can't see it in the Zapruder film. But the initial movement is not to the back and to the left. The initial movement is very, very slightly to the front. Reason 4, if you do an infrared of all the blood and all the spray, the infrared is moving forward. Impossible if he was hit from the front, moving back. There are 4 reasons, but then I'm going to give you the 5th. And no conspiracy theorist has ever explained this. Why it can't be a shot from the grassy knoll. The bullet was moving 1,200 miles an hour. A bullet that hit him here did no damage on this side of his head. There is no damage in the autopsies and the x-rays anywhere. There's no exit wound. There's no damage on the left side of his brain. Jackie Kennedy wasn't hit. Nellie Connolly wasn't hit. There are no bullet marks on the limousine to the back. But people on the other side never once said, we saw a bullet go by, we felt a bullet go by. How could a bullet going 1,200 miles an hour at this angle not hit the other side of the head? I will tell you very frankly, it is impossible. It is impossible. So, if we eliminate the grassy knoll, we've eliminated the front, we have the shots coming from the back, does that mean that Lee Harvey Oswald did it? No. That does not mean that Lee Harvey Oswald did it, but we will move to the next line of logic. Based on where they're sitting, there are 2 places that they could have been shot from. 2 buildings. One is the Dale Tex building, which was the building right across the street and slightly behind the book depository, and the other was the book depository. Let's look at the Dale Tex building for a second. By the way, that was the building that Abraham Zapruder's office was in. It was a much busier building than the book depository. People coming in and out all the time. It was a real, office building. There are 2 offices the shots could have come from. Someone would have had to have special access to those offices. You couldn't just walk in. Okay? Very hard to secret a rifle in, very hard to secret a rifle out. Virtually no escape route. When they looked, or if you look at pictures of the Dale Tex building, and there are a couple of pictures right before the assassination, the window to one of the rooms where he could have been shot from is closed, and there are people on the floor right below it. It's closed 20 seconds before the assassination. and there are people right below it. The other window was sort of obscured by a fire exit. Would have been possible, but not very likely, and it's not the kind of thing that an assassin would do, to shoot through a fire exit. And in fact, there were people standing next to that one too, nobody reported anything. And in the Daletex building afterwards, they went through the whole building. No gun, no bullets, no shells, no strangers, no forced or open access to those offices. I will tell you, it's flat impossible that anybody shot from there without any of those things being found. So, we've eliminated the front, we've eliminated the grassy knoll, we've eliminated the Daletex building, but what do we have? Well, we have the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. What are our facts? Our facts are that Lee Harvey Oswald had access to there. He had no alibi. Nobody saw him anywhere else. Our facts are that he came to work that morning with a friend and he had curtain rods in a box. But you know what? Nobody ever found any curtain rods in the Texas School Book Depository. But what they did find on the 6th floor was a Mannlicher Carcano rifle. That Mannlicher Carcano rifle fired 3 shots. The bullets match and only match, the bullets that hit these two guys, the bullet fragments we have, match and only match that rifle. That rifle was bought and owned by Lee Harvey Oswald. There's a picture of him with that rifle. It says Hunter, a fascist, on the back of his right floor. He actually tried to assassinate General Edwin Walker with that rifle. People 1 floor, and there is, by the way, there is a picture, in case you're wondering, of someone in the 6th floor right at the time of the assassination. We can't tell it's Lee Harvey Oswald, they've resolved that as hazard, but that is the 6th floor window in the seconds before the assassination. Okay, you see it up there? A. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald left the building after the assassination. Within 10 minutes, the building was sealed off. All the employees were there except for Lee Harvey Oswald. And let me tell you 2 quick stories. By the way, there are 1,000 great stories that I can tell you, interesting stories that you never hear. Lee Harvey Oswald was actually stopped twice on his way out of the Texas School Book Depository. The first time by a policeman and a supervisor. And the policeman asked the supervisor, does this guy work here? And they said yes, because the police at that juncture couldn't conceive that the assassin was an employee of the Texas School Book Depository. So they just let him pass. The second person who was in contact with Lee Harvey Oswald as he left the book depository was the reporter Robert McNeil from the McNeil-Lehrer Report. He was a young reporter. He was getting off the bus. He knew something bad had happened. He went off the bus. He went right in front of the book depository, and a guy stopped. He stopped a guy there and said, "Where's the phone?" The guy was in a T-shirt, young guy in a T-shirt, and the guy said, "The thing is in there." And he called his office. Well, that was Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, Robert McNeil said later on, I think it was Lee Harvey Oswald, but I'm not sure. But Lee Harvey Oswald told the police when he was captured, well, I ran into a young blonde Secret Service agent with his ID card, and I told him where the phone was. But there were no young blonde Secret Service agents, and the Secret Service didn't wear cards. But the pool reporters did. So it was Robert McNeil that he ran into. But getting back to what we were saying, we have all that. We have that rifle. We have those shells. We have everything there. And Lee Harvey Oswald leaves the building. And what does he do? He kills a policeman a half an hour later. And what does he do after that? He runs to a movie theater and tries to kill another policeman. His gun jams. And then he's captured. And he tells lie after lie to the police. And by the way, when we get a chance, I'll tell you some interesting things about Lee Harvey Oswald, because he's not a mope. The police captain interrogating a guy named Will Fritz was one of the best police interrogators in the country. And Lee Harvey Oswald stood him down for 2 days. So we have all of that information. All of that. Now I just have to tell you all. Lee Harvey Oswald shot the President of the United States. Did he do it alone? Well, I can't tell you for certain that he did it alone. Because if you go some religious people here must know St. Augustine. St. Augustine said 2,000 years ago, we cannot prove a negative. I cannot prove to you there was no conspiracy. But I can give you common sense that there's no conspiracy. Oh, let me say one more thing. I forgot one thing about the pristine bullet. A lot of the conspiracies like the pristine bullet, you know. It's not really pristine, but it's a little off. And it was planted at the hospital, right? Planted at the hospital? Right? You've all seen that. You know, you've seen JFK, they planted it on the stretcher.
Yeah, they found it.
Right, they found it, okay? Couldn't be, right?
Yes.
All right, do you know what I'm going to call this post-hoc knowledge? When you watch Goldfinger, everybody's here seen Goldfinger, right? He's on that little stretcher there and the laser's coming at him and he says to Goldfinger, you expect me to talk? And Goldfinger says, I expect you to die. Well, you know what? When we're watching it, we know that Sean Connery is not going to die. But the people in the movie at that point don't know he's not going to die. But we know it because we have post-hoc knowledge. And for the pristine bullet, let me explain to you something. Okay, conspiracy. Someone found the bullet that was fired from Oswald's rifle, and it was slightly deformed. They sent some intern, some, mope over to plant it in the hospital apartment. But they had to plant it on just the right stretcher. Couldn't plant it on the wrong stretcher. It had to be Connolly stretcher. Couldn't be Kennedy stretcher. Couldn't be another stretcher. They had to have Connolly stretcher. And they planted it there. Not very likely. Not impossible, but not very likely. But I have a question for you all. Why would they do that? Well, the reason they would do that is to try and support the single bullet theory and refute a conspiracy. But there's only one problem with that. The single bullet theory wasn't a theory for another 3 months. At the time they found that bullet, nobody knew what happened. There would be no reason to plant a bullet at that point because nobody knew what happened and there was no single bullet theory. Post-hoc knowledge. And when we talk about a conspiracy, we're going to talk about post-hoc knowledge. I know that Lee Harvey Oswald had ties to the CIA and the FBI and the Mafia and Lyndon Johnson and this and that. I know. But the problem is, most of that doesn't make any difference. Because no one in the world knew.
Where's the other slide?
He's got it. He's got him there.
Oh, well, what do I do to him?
Just space bar.
Oh, spacebar, okay. And I'm not really going to use too much, many more slides. Oh, there, by the way, there are the trajectories of the bullets. That's from the book depository. That's from the grassy knoll. Can't be, based on everything we know. Unless, of course, somebody took all the bullets and hid all the evidence. But that didn't happen. Okay, there are your trajectories. Now, conspiracy, CIA, FBI, I know we had all those ties, doesn't matter. No one knew that Lee Harvey Oswald and John Kennedy would ever be in the same place until either late October or indeed in November. Now, I know that Lee Harvey Oswald went to Mexico City on September 27th and he met with the Cubans and he met with the Russians. But the problem is that John Kennedy didn't decide to go to Dallas until the second week or the end of the first week in October. So whatever went on with Lee Harvey Oswald and the CIA in 61 or 62 or in September 63, answer me this. If no one knew that Lee Harvey Oswald and John Kennedy would ever be in the same place, why would they discuss an assassination with him? Unless, of course, he was a Manchurian candidate, following him all over. But we have virtual certainty that before November 22nd, Lee Harvey Oswald and John Kennedy were never in the same city. So why would anybody talk to Lee Harvey Oswald about assassinating John Kennedy in September of 1963 when nobody knew that they'd ever be in the same place? It's pretty hard to believe. Okay, but let's move up the time span. It could still happen, couldn't it? Yes, let's move up the time span. Lee Harvey Oswald got a job at the Texas School Book Depository in October. Still, no guarantee he's ever going to see John Kennedy. They do not have a motorcade route yet. By the way, he had an option for a job at the airport, but he didn't take it. I don't know, you know, I'm a citizen, I might take the job at the airport if I thought I was going to get a shot at the president, but he didn't. He wanted to transfer away from the depository, they didn't let him. Now, here's an interesting thing, I want to see what your conspiracies say about this. The FBI was following Lee Harvey Oswald. They went to his house twice at the end of October. He wasn't there either time. They talked to Marina, but Marina didn't speak very good English. She spoke Russian. She didn't really know what to say. So the FBI agent gave her his card, said, you know, have Lee call me when he comes in. She tells Lee about it. Lee goes bananas. Lee goes ballistic. So in the first week in November, what did Lee do? Lee went to the FBI office in Dallas, read them the riot act, and said, if you ever talk to my wife again, I will blow up the FBI, and gave them a note to that effect. That note was destroyed after the assassination, not because of the conspiracy, but because the agents were rightfully concerned that if Hoover knew about that, well, there'd be some heads to roll. But I ask you, would someone who's involved in a conspiracy go to the FBI and make a big deal of themselves 2.5 weeks before the assassination? It seemed to me that would be the last thing you would do. But let's take it further. The earliest that a conspiracy could have worked, knowing where John Kennedy's going to be, is either November 18th or November 15th. November 18th, which is when I think Lee Harvey Oswald did know that John Kennedy was going by Houston and Elm and going that way. It was in the Dallas Morning News. So he had 3 days. They had 3 days. But I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to conspiracists, because the motorcade route was planned on November 15th. So think in terms of today, think a week ago yesterday. The only people the motorcade route was known to were the Kennedy entourage, the Secret Service, the Dallas police, and John Connally and his people. And I will concede to you, I will concede that it is possible there was a mole who might have found out as early as the Friday before the assassination the motorcade route. But here is what would have to happen. They would have to plan in 1 week with Lee Harvey Oswald, whatever they were going to do. And by the way, all your conspiracies, you have to talk about not why, but how. Because that's where you have to address the physical evidence, the ballistics, everything like that. Then you have a week to do it. Okay? And there's no escape route for Oswald. When he left on the bus, there's no escape route. So those conspirators have to be 100% dead certain that if he's captured, he's not going to talk. Unless, of course, Rudy kills him, but we'll talk about that in a second. All right, well, what do we know? Trust me when I tell you, they've gone through Oswald very, very carefully in that last week. Not perfectly, but carefully. Here's what we know. Nobody left any evidence that they saw him in his apartment. No fingerprints, no physical evidence, no notes. Nobody left any evidence at his house. No fingerprints, no evidence, no notes. Nobody saw him talking to anybody. Marina, his brother, his family, nobody saw him talking to anybody. There are no phone records. It's not like today, granted the NSA, so we don't have all of his phone records, but nobody has any phone records. He talked to anybody. Nobody at work saw him talking to anybody. They had to do it pretty damn well. No money transfer. We don't have his IRS records yet, but hey, if somebody conspired with Lee Harvey Oswald, this was ideology, this wasn't money. Okay? So that's what you'd have to do for the conspiracy. Now, 2017 or 2037 or 2067, maybe some document will come out that said 2 Cuban agents came to Lee Harvey Oswald's apartment on the night of November 15th, in the dead of night at 2 in the morning, wearing their gloves, and said to him, listen, we got an insider in the Dallas Police Department who knows he's coming this way next week. If you whack him and you get away, we'll make you a hero in Cuba. If that came out, I would say that's basically unbelievable. But I would also say, you know what? I cannot say it didn't happen because there is no evidence to say that could not have happened. But that's what it would have taken. And I'm going to flat tell you, that didn't happen. That's the conspiracy angle. Remember, you have to have a reason to want to kill the president, but you also have to have the opportunity. And nobody knew that Lee Harvey Oswald would have the opportunity until, at the minimum, November 15th and more likely November 18th. Jack Ruby. Jack Ruby's buried, by the way, about 25 feet from my grandparents. I see his grave every time I go out to see my grandparents. Buried out there in Harwood Heights. Was Jack Ruby part of the conspiracy? Well, that's actually, to me, is pretty easy to answer, and the answer is no. And I'll tell you why. Let's go ahead to Sunday, tomorrow. Y'all remember the thing. They were questioning Oswald very, very aggressively. And I have to tell you, Will Fitz was a tremendous investigator. By the way, I happen to think that Lee Harvey Oswald would have been a great CIA agent. And I'll tell you why later. He would have been a great CIA agent. He wasn't, but he would have been a great one. He was not a mope. Lee Harvey Oswald was dyslexic, and he wasn't educated and everything. He's smarter than a lot of the people in the press who call him stupid, trust me. You know, when you look at what he did, he was not a stupid guy. He was cunning. But he was supposed to be transferred from the city jail to the county jail at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning. But the main investigator wanted to question him for another hour. He thought maybe he could break in. Problem was the FBI kept going, and the FBI guys were jerks. Okay? They couldn't, you know, they'd ask him stupid questions. So he was supposed to leave at 10 o'clock. Well, at 10 o'clock, Jack Ruby was in bed. Why wasn't Jack Ruby at the jail at 10 o'clock to kill him? Now, it's possible somebody called Ruby and said, he's not leaving yet. It's possible. Can't say that didn't happen. It's not very probable, but it's possible. Oswald left his jail cell at about 11:17 and was shot at 11:21. You can look those times up. I'm not making them up. Here's what we know. At 11:17, Jack Ruby was at a Western Union station about a 2 to 3 minute walk away. He was Western Union money, sending money to one of the strippers in the Carousel Club. The time that Lee Harvey Oswald was getting ready to be transferred, Jack Ruby was still at the Western Union station. In other words, he cut it real close. The Western Union station about a 2 to 3 minute walk. So we had a minute, maybe on the outside too, but probably less, probably even less than a minute. He's at the Western Union station. Now, the first question to you is, how did he know he'd be first in line? How did he know some mope like me wouldn't be there, you know, who didn't know what they were doing and would take him? How did he know that the clerk wasn't a mope? How could he know those things to cut it so close? But you know what? There's an answer for that too. Maybe he was just waiting for the right moment. There was nobody in line. Figured, hey, I got nothing to do. I can kill some time. Email Candy Bar some money. It's possible. Not very likely, but possible. And then he walked over to the jail. But here we come up with the thing that's not possible. When Lee Harvey Oswald left the jail cell with the guy with the hat, by the way, the guy with the hat's name is James Lavelle, he's still alive, real straight guy, Marine, he was at Pearl Harbor. Think about it, the only guy who was at Pearl Harbor, the assassination and Oswald's murder. He was the guy who Ruby was handcuffed. Well, Oswald left the jail cell, went down the hall, he was handcuffed, went down the hallway, was to the elevator, and then you know what happened? Oswald said, I'm cold, I want to get my sweater. I left it in my jail cell. And if you look, by the way, look at all the pictures of Oswald on Saturday, you'll see him in a t-shirt. And when he's shot, you see him in a sweater. So what they did was, okay, walked him back to his cell, took off his handcuffs, got his sweater, put his sweater on, put his handcuffs back on, took him out of his cell, and took him out of the yard. And by their admission, it took about 2 to 3 minutes. In other words, if Lee Harvey Oswald doesn't go back to his cell for that sweater, he's in that van before Jack Ruby gets to the thing. Now, my obvious question to you all is, how did Jack Ruby know Lee Harvey Oswald would go back for that sweater? And the answer to that is, he didn't know. He couldn't know. Which is why It was an impetuous act, which is also supported by the fact that here are some of the people who've looked at a relationship between Ruby and Oswald. Besides the Warren Commission, besides the House, virtually every major newspaper in the United States, virtually every major television station in the United States, the Dallas Police, the Secret Service, the FBI, the CIA, most of the other people, and no one has found any credible evidence that Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald ever had any contact before the Friday night when Jack Ruby was hanging around. But that was an impetuous act. And for those who think it was the mob, because of course Jack Ruby's from Chicago, the mob, obvious question. Jack Ruby didn't die until January 1967. I don't think the mob lets guys like that live for 3 years, do they? I'm going to read you one thing and then I'm going to close and then you can throw all the objects you want at me.
Yeah, I think we will.
Okay?
More slides?
Any man liberty? No more slides.
Okay.
Okay, no more slides. You've seen the slide. Maybe one more, let's see. There's Oswald. There's the picture of Oswald. That's it. Okay? Well, we don't know it's Oswald because we can't get the resolution. But that's someone in the 6th floor window right before the assassination. Because we have more information. What do we have? We have the information from the last 50 years. This is something that I'm writing for the newspapers. I don't know if they'll publish it yet. But this is about more information, and it's about human nature. Does it really matter who shot JFK and from what rooftop? That's the question Donald Sutherland asked Kevin Costner in Oliver Stone's JFK. Right? Okay. Now that the 50th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination has passed, perhaps the answer is no. But a final thought about human nature is in order. The event, like all the wars and tragedies before it, will soon recede into the past. One day, all those with first-hand knowledge will be dead, and the caviling among conspiracy theorists and those who believe Lee Harvey Oswald alone killed JFK may linger for a brief while, but eventually it'll end, probably not with a bang, but with a whimper. The assassination will be relegated to the vagaries of the history books. The moving hand writes and having written moves on. The majority of Americans who believe a probable conspiracy recently received a late boost from a high-ranking source, Secretary of State John Kerry, who sent a Parthian shot and weighed in on his belief in a conspiracy. Posse Donald Sutherland, Kerry advanced no theory on what person indeed shot JFK or from what rooftop, which is the hallmark of the conspiracy. Without facts, how can one know how the CIA actually engineered the crime? In this respect, circumstances have created questions apart from the actual crime, questions that involve the aforementioned human nature, something most conspiracy theorists put little faith in. The passage of 50 years means those intellectually honest conspiracy theorists, all of you, by the way, I'm sure fall into that category, as opposed to the ideologues, the ignorant, the paranoid, the fortune and fame seekers, ultimately must have an obligation to address not only the events of November 22nd, 1963, but what's happened since. Things that involve the way ordinary people behave. Conspiracies demand cover-ups. They cannot happen otherwise. Many, if not most, JFK assassination theories require involvement by many people who either deliberately participated in a cover-up or deliberately lied. Some theories extend to the highest levels of government, and others involve our most trusted members of society, doctors, lawyers, military officials. Over 5 decades, some of those people must have told family members or friends confidentially about their involvement in the crime of the century. In 50 years, that would mean hundreds, possibly more, who might have some guilty knowledge. But no one, including family and friends, has ever come forward with a credible admission they covered up or willingly lied to cover up. Not a single son, daughter, lover, or friend has ever followed his or her conscience and opened up. How could that be? And there are 2 families in particular that have much to gain from providing evidence to debunk the Warren Commission narrative. The Kennedys and the Oswalds. No one from either family has ever done so. Remember, Robert Kennedy was the country's top law enforcement official. He had more incentive and means at his disposal than anyone in the country. JFK was his brother and his best friend. But Robert Kennedy never did anything to disprove the official report. Why? And in the next half century, virtually the entire family, including brothers, children, and grandchildren, with virtually unlimited resources, has never advanced any concrete proof to the official theory of being wrong, and they're reluctant to speak publicly. Some, including Robert Kennedy Jr., say they disbelieve the official report, but evidence to that effect is never forthcoming. Likewise, Lee Harvey Oswald's brother would want to demonstrate his brother's innocence, or at least mitigate it, but he never has. Neither has Lee Harvey Oswald's wife. In all that time, nothing from either family. And the same for the families of Jack Ruby and Lyndon Johnson. What possible reason other than there's nothing there? Likewise, no one has ever advanced a coherent alternative narrative to the official story that could withstand even the most casual scrutiny. No credible counter theory that actually explains the physical evidence, not simply the true identity of the alternative assassin, but no alternative theory with specific details how the crime was actually carried out that matches the wounds, bullet trajectories, forensics, and ballistics of the crime. Despite all those years and all those billions of pages written, not a single consistent narrative among all the claims of government involvement, triangulation of fire, grassy knoll shooters, and umbrella men. Among all the lawyers with assassination investigation, from those on the Warren Commission to those on the House Committee to some of the most brilliant conspiracy theorists, not one in 50 years has ever brought a successful case into court actually challenging any major aspect of the assassination. People with extensive investigative and legal experience are willing to speak in forums, write books, and go on television, but curiously, they've stayed out of court for 50 years. Does that make sense? In general, conspiracy theorists are inclined to tailor facts to fit personal preconceptions. Minds are made up to believe something, and if the facts contradict the preconception, they just beat the facts into submission until they're silenced. In this case, there remains the further advantage of being able to cite unreleased government documents, some of which will not be released in our lifetime. Perhaps those documents contain the Rosetta Stone. Perhaps they'll show a small band of CIA conspiratorial masterminds, or maybe a group of Castro agents who coerced Oswald and knew he would not talk if captured. It's possible, but not likely. More likely, the released documents will just encourage even more theories. So Donald Sutherland's question remains viable for all conspiracy theorists. Does it really matter who and from what rooftop? And the answer to that depends on your view of human nature.
All right.
Okay, we'll get into the questions now. I'm going to hand the microphone back to Dr. Franklin because you're going to be doing most of the talking, not me. You'll need to answer
wanna
questions.
call?
I'll just call on people, but people don't need to hear my voice. Jeff, you had your hand up.
Okay. Sir, you and I talked a bit before your speech
Yes.
about the security
Yes.
situation. And my question to you pertains to the history of this sort of thing
Yes.
in similar cases.
Yes.
All right. It is said, your position as I understand it is that Jack Kennedy, A, had Secret Service protection of some sort.
Yes.
Right? B, that he was killed by a sniper.
Yes.
C, that he had no help to speak of
Yes.
from any source.
I mean, no help that was realistic help at that point.
Right, okay. The question to you is, has there been, in the entirety of human history, any other assassination successful of a head of state or head of government where all three of those conditions, Secret Service protection, sniper, no help, pertain?
Philip of Macedon.
Oh, gee,
Well,
yeah, with an arrow.
Okay, that's
One
that's
full
Right.
answer.
go ahead.
You've got me with sniper. I mean, because a sniper is a special thing. But hey, it happened to Lincoln.
No, I'm talking about snipers. That makes all the difference in the world.
No, not to my knowledge. Now let me say this: there were no look, the Secret Service was drinking the night before. Okay. The Secret Service was partying. I don't know how badly they were partying. It's no different than today, right? Obama's people, there were a couple of them partying. It's no different than today.
That's better.
I might be following.
They weren't on the back of his car as they should have been. You know why they weren't on the back of his car as they should have been?
Tell them that.
No.
John Kennedy told them not to.
Yeah.
One full
Let me
answer.
follow this up if I can.
Okay.
Let me follow it up.
All right. Well, Do you want to ask your follow-up question right now or later on?
Well,
Well, listen, we need to kind of, there's a whole lot of people, other people with their hands up, Jeff, you know, and I gotta be fair to everybody. Tim, you had your hand up too. You have
Yeah.
a question?
I just want to know, in your research, have you done anything on 9/11 and the Twin Towers?
No, I don't bother with 9/11. 9/11 is out of my domain. I don't deal with it.
Okay.
You hear that, YouTube? I don't deal with 9/11. Leave me alone.
All right, Gene, you have a question?
Yes, I am. Sir, I'm interested in your background. I mean, are you investigator? Are you investigator? I mean, like similar to, say, FBI agent?
No, I'm not.
Are you familiar with forensic type investigation?
No, I'm not. You know what I was? I was an intensive care physician at the county hospital for 32 years.
He loved to have excitement and exciting people in his restaurant, even if they were infamous, even if they were criminals. He loved that excitement. So he was in and out of that station all the time. Nobody even gave it a thought.
If you see the questioning of Oswald on Friday night, Ruby is at the back of the room.
Yep.
Ruby's at the back of the room.
But my question is, why is there still over 1 million pages that they haven't released that they're supposed to have?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I do not know the answer.
All right, all right, Charlie.
Yeah, Cory, there's anywhere between 2 and 5 shots, and you settle on 3.
I settle on 3.
But you're a physician, and
Right.
maybe I'm a drugstore physicist.
Okay.
But this guy, like me, gets shot in the back of the head,
Right.
and I wasn't aware that our brains are under some sort of state of compression.
Yes.
But in the video, Jackie is crawling on the trunk of the car
Right.
to retrieve
Brain.
the skull of
Right.
her husband. Now, if I'm shot in the back of the head, does my skull pop up over to that side of the room?
Well, it looks like if your skull is shot
I mean, I'm shot this way.
with a missile at 1,200 miles an hour, it might explode at its weakest point in the fontanelles. I'll also tell you, one of the interesting things is neither Jackie nor any of the other people there were ever worried about getting hit with a bullet.
What?
None of them were ever worried about getting hit with a bullet. And remember, from the grassy knoll, Jackie is right in the line of fire. So were the people behind her.
That doesn't establish anything.
Well, you know, it establishes one thing. When we talk about 5 bullets and Oliver talks about, where are those bullets? Where is the bullet damage? Where are the trajectories? They are nowhere. They are nowhere. No one has ever had them. Do I know that? I know that as well as we can know. You can talk about 5, 6, 7, 12
We
bullets.
don't have access to 3,000 pieces of evidence that are hidden away.
That's not a question.
All right, listen.
That's the answer.
You're not the MC, shut up.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right, one fool at a time, everybody. One fool at a time. All right, one fool at a time. All right, Ellen, go ahead.
Okay, I have 2 questions, at least one. First of all, why did they classify all this information for, I don't know how long it was, for such lengthy periods of time if there was nothing to hide?
Same thing she asked, I don't know that.
Okay, second question, when I saw that documentary, they were talking about the angle of the 3rd shot, that it wasn't from up above, that it was from a different range, so...
Well, the interesting thing is that documentary,
Wait, doctor, let Ellen finish.
Okay.
She hadn't
Well,
finished
that wasn't
saying
the
what she
question.
wanted.
How do you address the angle of the shot?
right, the interesting thing, that documentary supports that the shot was from behind. It's simply a question of what the angle is in that shot, okay? It is significant, but I would advance to you that they put the theory ahead of the fact. But the point is, whether that's true or not, if you believe what they're saying there, that blows out the grassy knoll theory.
All right, Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah, you mentioned a few times they got all these hotshot investigators interrogating him. They couldn't crack him.
No?
He wouldn't break.
No?
Is it possible that he didn't have anything to tell him?
And you know what the answer to that is? No, it's not possible. And the reason it's not possible is because he told them plenty. He told them an awful lot of lies that they could document. He told them that he never had a rifle. He told them that he was not Alex Hiddell, despite the fact that it was found in this thing. He first told them he was on an upper floor and moved down, and then he told them on a lower floor and moved up. So the answer to your question is no, it is not possible he had nothing to tell them. He had plenty to tell them, but he never admitted to the assassination. But he lied, wait a minute, excuse me, he lied his way through 2 days of things with documentable lies.
Okay.
Documentable lies.
Okay, sir, you had a question?
Me?
Yes, you, sir.
What, isn't it true that the brain was never recovered and we don't know when?
Interesting
so,
story.
Going to his point about the bullet fragments?
Interesting story about the brain. No one is certain where the brain is, but we have pretty good evidence where the brain is. The brain was removed after the autopsy. They took plenty of pictures of it, but it was removed after the autopsy, and it was not recovered. The most likely place the brain is, it's buried with John Kennedy, because in all likelihood, the people at Bethesda gave the brain to Robert Kennedy. In 1966, in the middle of the night, and there are actually pictures of this, by the way, Robert Kennedy, Robert McNamara, and a bunch of people went out to Arlington with a box. We don't know the brain was in that box, but there are pictures of them late at night putting the box in John Kennedy's grave at Arlington. That's where we think the brain is. We don't know that.
Wouldn't that be, I mean, it's a crime. It's a crime. Why wouldn't that be unusual to give the brain to?
It is a crime. It would be very unusual. There were a lot of unusual things that happened. You know, there was a big fight between the Texas coroner and the Secret Service. Because,
and wouldn't that have some, possibly have some bullet fragments?
well, let's put it this way. They have x-rays, they have pictures, and they have everything like that. The left side of the brain is completely pristine.
Okay. All right, Rob, you had a question.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I recently heard a theory that while Oswald shot him, he was shot again by accident by a Secret Service following car.
8 people in the following car, and not one saw or heard a shot, and 2 of them were Kennedy's best friends. How likely?
Very likely.
Well,
Very likely? Somebody said very likely? No, it was not very likely.
Well, that's, all right.
Why? All right, my question is, whoever said very likely, why would Dave Powers and Kenny O'Donnell not say that?
All right.
interviewed a
All right.
have you?
Why did you get so interested in this topic in the first place?
Can I tell you that at the end?
Yes,
Can I
no
defer
problem.
that question? Okay, I will
Okay.
defer that question. It's a superb question. I will defer to Leanne.
Sure.
I'm going to answer that question in
Go
my last
ahead.
remarks. No, my last remarks I want to answer.
Oh, you want to answer the question with your last? Oh, okay, sure. So whatever. Okay, now, did anybody else have a question? Who? Oh, Andy. Okay.
It'll make a difference in a lot of our rebuttals. If you'd please tell us why you're interested in giving these presentations if it doesn't matter what happened in '63. If it's old news and it doesn't matter, why give presentations?
I didn't say it doesn't matter. I did not say it doesn't matter.
I was making notes. I thought you said,
No.
who cares whether it was a conspiracy?
No, that was a rhetorical question from JFK.
Okay. Sir.
My question is...
Wait, okay.
All right. You know what? I will answer that for your rebuttal. Okay, I will answer that for your rebuttal.
All right. All right. This man's had his hand up for a while. Go ahead, sir.
Do the names Lenny Patrick or Dave Yaris mean anything?
Chicago mobsters.
Associated with who, for example?
Well, I would imagine they were ultimately associated with the mob itself. You know, I would imagine they're associated with the Cardo and those guys. You know.
And Jack Ruby?
Yes, Jack Ruby was associated with the mob.
Them. He was with them, right?
Would the mob use somebody like Jack Ruby to carry out a hit? Yeah, I'm just curious. Would they? Would they?
He was on the scene.
I don't know if that was
Right around the
a,
corner.
I don't know if that was a yes, was it?
He got it done. Why not?
All right.
What's the trouble?
Well, that's all right. Let's now, Gene, you have a question.
Yeah. What is your sausage? Did you go to Dallas
I have been to Dallas, yes.
and you surveyed the geography?
Yes.
Did you talk to any witnesses?
No. Well, everything I'm reading is, everything I'm telling you is secondhand, but I have been to Dallas, yes.
Could you give me a couple authors if you're talking from a book?
Well, I will tell you that the most, you give a book, you're going to get, that's a bad book. But I will give you the most authoritative. There are 3 books that I think are very, very good. One is Case Closed by Gerald Posner. One is Killing Kennedy by Bill O'Reilly. Now, it's not a real forensic book. But the best book is by the guy who prosecuted Charles Manson, Reclaiming History, Vincent Bugliosi. And he talks about virtually everything we've talked about here. Now, whether you believe in conspiracy or not, I would suggest you pick this book up. It's a good book to pick up, whether you believe it or not.
Okay, I just have one real quick question, because you brought up in passing the House Committee.
House Committee, yes.
Which in the late 70s, for those who don't know, concluded, if I remember correctly, concluded that there probably was a conspiracy to kill John F. Kennedy. What do you think about that? About the House Committee's findings?
Can I ask you a question? About the House Committee. Does anybody know why the House Committee concluded there was a conspiracy?
Well, I think they concluded there probably was.
Why?
4 shots was the deal.
One bit of evidence. And how did they conclude there were 4 shots?
They were recording.
A dictabelt recording. Now, I want you to think about this a second, because nobody discusses this. They were all ready to conclude there was no conspiracy until the dictabelt analysis. The dictabelt analysis was supposedly, there was a policeman who had his microphone open in Dallas that day. They sent it to Queens College to 2 sort of professors, and they did analysis, and they came up to the committee and said 95% chance there were 2 shots. Okay? Now, I'm sorry, 4 shots. 4 shots. I'm sorry. Okay? What's interesting is they never got any other corroboration on a 4 shot. And by the way, if there were a 4 shot from the grassy knoll, it missed, right? Okay, it missed, so. But they never got any corroboration. That, by the way, is amazing. The people cite the House Committee, and they never got any physical corroboration of that. Here's the story. You may not know this story. So, okay, they closed up their thing. We never did find out who it was, but there was a 4-shot conspiracy based on a dictabelt recording alone. About a year or 2 later, there was a acetate tape made of that dictabelt recording. And it went into, I think it was Gallery magazine, some dirty magazine. There was a 22-year-old kid in Ohio who liked to look at dirty pictures and dirty magazines, but he was also a sound guy. He was one of these guys with engineering stuff all over. And he put the acetate on. And he heard something that he'd never read that there was. He heard a voice. And he, amplified this and that. I mean, he was an amateur guy, but he said, hey, there's something there. And he called his local guys, and they called their local guys, and they called the House of Representatives. And the House of Representatives brought the dictabelt, and what they did was they took it to the National Academy of Sciences. And they had it analyzed by Walter Alvarez, who my physicists back there will know, by IBM, Princeton, Harvard, Bell Laboratories, everybody. And they said, this is wrong. First of all, there's no way the 95% chance is right, but they said, this is wrong. There were 2 microphones, they weren't open at the same time, no one can identify who the motorcycle cop would have been. It was the flimsiest evidence in the world, never held up. And it was printed in Science. Now I will tell you, it is my background, Science is the most prestigious scientific journal in the United States. It was printed in 1983. Their analysis of that dictabelt recording where they say, these guys were wrong. And if they were wrong, the House Committee basing it on that evidence alone, which, how could they do that to begin with? How could you base it on that with no physical corroboration? Think about that. They're wrong. So the House Committee, I'm sorry, it doesn't wash.
Okay, Charlie, did you have a
Just
question?
one quick one. Trying to place Lee Oswald at the time of the alleged crime of his. He is photographed watching motorcade, and then you yourself placed him earlier that he was placed by a reporter at the outside of the building. Why isn't he up in the...
As soon as he took the 3rd shot, He hid the
It's a
rifle.
photo of him.
No, that's before the shooting. That's before the shots.
Well, he went down and then he went back up.
No. He was at the 6th floor planning the shots. He did not take the shot coming up Houston Street for a couple of reasons. He took it coming down Elm. Took the first shot, took the second shot, took the third shot. Had a 4th round ready, didn't take it. Hit the rifle, crossed the room, took the elevator down to took the stairs down, to the 2nd floor, got a Coke very quickly, was stopped, went out the building, took a bus stop, took a taxi cab. He was out of the building in 5 minutes. They sealed off the building in 10 minutes.
All right, guys, look, Ellen had her hand up, but after that, we're going to have to go into the rebuttal period.
Let's go to rebuttal.
Let's just go to rebuttal.
Sorry, Mike, what you have to say, you could do that as a rebuttal, maybe. Okay, go ahead, Ellen.
Well, I was just gonna say that, well, I have 2 parts. One is, it seems like your evidence overall for Oswald is not beyond reasonable doubt. And obviously, he doesn't even have room to give his own defense, obviously. But do you have any evidence of his motive? I mean, you gave an idea of a motive, but do you have any evidence behind the motive, since you don't have very strong evidence that he was for sure the one who did it, and there's a lot of doubt? Do you have evidence of the motive?
Well, the short answer to your question is no. I have no hard evidence of his motive. But the second part of that answer is, if you don't think that's not big-time evidence that Lee Harvey Oswald killed John Kennedy, then I'm not going to be able to convince you any other way. Because short of seeing him do it, you can't get much stronger evidence than that.
All right, let's go to rebuttal.
Let's go to rebuttal.
You're going to give your final speech. Okay, now we're going to get into the rebuttals. Now, I will explain, I see a gentleman has his hand up. Neil, did you have something?
Nope.
Okay. Oh, you want to be first in line? Okay, it looks like Mike, it looks like you took the chair.
He was here, he was sitting there.
Okay, well guys, now let me just explain real quick how it works. First of all, I just want to ask each of you, I want a show of hands. How many, apart from the 3 gentlemen now sitting in the, okay, would you mind sitting down, please? Okay, there you go. Now, apart from the 3 gentlemen sitting in the chairs, how many people would like to give a rebuttal speech? Everybody who wants to give a rebuttal, raise your hand. Okay, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I count 6 people. And then we got our speakers, so that's 7.
Go about 4 minutes apiece.
4 minutes apiece. All right.
Only time it.
No, I don't agree. I say 5 minutes apiece. According to my calculations, we've got enough time for 5 minutes each person.
Okay.
So what we're going to do now, let me just explain real quick. These are the on-deck chairs over here.
Yes, from yelling.
Okay. Oh, well, I'll try to talk louder. I know many people. Okay, well, I know many people may have trouble hearing, and I'll try to accommodate them. Now, these are the on-deck chairs here, and okay. All right. These are the on-deck chairs here, and if you have a rebuttal speech to make, you just come up here and take your seat in the chair, and you kind of play musical chairs, move your way to the head of the line. All right. So, all right, Neil, you go ahead.
Hi. I came to confuse things by adding some more facts, but I think it would help if I very quickly tell you 2 things about myself. One, I'm a skeptic. That means I'm difficult to convince. It doesn't mean I already know the establishment is lying, and it doesn't mean that I automatically dismiss the guys with the tinfoil helmets. They have equally uphill fights in selling me. Number 2, I have personally hypothesized that if I had the incontrovertible facts about the Kennedy assassination, and I had a stack of evidence supporting those facts. At this late date, I'm not sure what difference it would make. How many people were fans of the Realist magazine put out by Paul Krasner? A couple? Yeah, okay. How many people have never heard of him and don't know what I'm talking about? Cool, okay. The Realist was founded in the late 50s, published into the early 70s. The guy who did it was Paul Krasner, who's still around, not quite as vigorous as he used to be. And the Realist was one of the great beacons of a total lack of respect in the highest and most constructive ways. I think Paul Krasner takes credit for having coined the term softcore porn. Somebody once said that he was the father of the underground press, and he demanded a paternity test. He was one of the founders of the Yippies. There are many strange stories, and many of them are true. This is one of them. Obviously, in running the Realist and being a target from all directions, he had quite a wide circle of friends and acquaintances. So, of course, he knew Mae Brussell. All of the Kennedy conspiracyologists know the name Mae Brussell. She was one of the most tireless investigators. The 26-volume Warren Report, she indexed it. So, a couple of days after the Watergate Hotel burglary, which later became quite an issue, Paul got a phone call from Mae Brussell. And she says, I know these guys. The newspaper had the names of the people who were arrested burglarizing the Democratic headquarters in the Watergate. I've got files on all those guys from my Kennedy investigations. Names, aliases, favorite disguises, MOs, the whole works. Wow, cool. So write an article. And she wrote up a big piece for the Realist. And then Paul took the next issue of the Realist to the printer and got a very nasty surprise. The printer said, I've been running you on credit. This issue, I need the cash up front. $5,000 to print the issue, cash on the barrelhead. And he's kind of stuck. Well, by coincidence, there was this avant-garde artist that he was friends with, and she and her new husband were in town, do lunch and catch up. And he tells them, the story, because this is where his life is today. So Yoko Ono and John Lennon get up from lunch, walk out of the restaurant, go to the nearest bank, take out $5,000 and hand it to him. Cash. That's how the Realist was the first periodical to tell the public about some of the serious significance of the Watergate burglary. And all of this is extremely well documented. I mean, I'm not going into the little fuzzy bits. No. This is fact. This is what happened. Make of it what you will. I enjoy wondering about conspiracy. I also enjoy coincidence.
Everybody in the church. Oh, yeah, I gotta get home to get to church.
I'm Michael Foley. I'd like to ask you, Dr. Franklin, are you a CIA agent?
Yeah.
I didn't ask you to promise me anything. I asked you, are you or aren't you a CIA agent? If you are, you have to tell me. And I'm asking you again, are you a CIA agent? Okay. Now, anyway, this BS about Donald Sutherland asking a stupid question, who cares? What's the matter now? Who killed Kennedy? Anybody, him and Hillary both. I don't know who wrote the question, who got it from the other. Anybody who raises that question is trying to create a diversion, and anybody who really seriously thinks that has never really thought about life or human beings or society or anything. If that question is valid, there's no reason to have courts. Some guy out here on the corner gets mad at somebody and shoots him and kills him. A year later, the case comes to court and the judge says, well, what do you plead, guilty or not guilty? The guy says, well, what does it matter now who killed the guy? It was a year ago. What's it matter? I'm walking out of here. And the judge says, yeah, okay. What does it matter? It don't matter. So anybody that asks that question is just totally absurd. Now, I don't know who killed John Kennedy, but I'll tell you what I think. Joe Kennedy, his father, was nothing but a penny ante gangster. Very rich one, but just a penny ante gangster. But anyway, he made the deal with Sam Giancana. He told Sam Giancana, you and all your colleagues do everything you can to get my son elected president. And when my son is president, he'll get you back Cuba. So Sam Giancana says, okay. The mafia went all out, not just in Chicago and Illinois, but nationwide. Sam Giancana and all his colleagues did everything they could to help John Kennedy get elected, and John Kennedy was elected. Then came the Bay of Pigs fiasco, and I could talk about that for a while, but anyway, the point is, after that, President Kennedy essentially told Sam Giancana, well, Sam, it didn't really work out too well. We're going to have to try to think up something else, you know. Well, take it easy. Relax, Sam. We'll get you back Cuba. Don't worry about it. Well, Sam Giancana went nuts, and he said, that ain't how it works. Sam Giancana called up his good friend, J. Edgar Hoover. And Sam Giancana said, yo, J. Edgar, John Kennedy reneged. Now he's got to come across and pay off. And Sam Giancana told his good friend J. Edgar Hoover, we take good care of you, J. Edgar. Now it's time for you to come across for us. We want John Kennedy dead. And J. Edgar Hoover is the one who ran the whole assassination thing. J. Edgar Hoover took care of everything. I don't know who shot John Kennedy. It may have been Lee Harvey Oswald, maybe not. The only bit of evidence that Dr. Franklin here tonight said that in any way is related to Lee Harvey Oswald is, the allegation is Lee Harvey Oswald's rifle was found in the Texas Book Depository, and that rifle was used to kill President Kennedy. Now that's the allegation. And that's the only thing. And I don't think that's enough to convict anybody of murder in any court. I think if somebody went in the court at 26 in California, and the only evidence was he happened to own a gun that was used in a murder, I don't think the guy would be convicted of anything except not keeping track of his gun or something like that. The idea of Lee Harvey Oswald, he was spotted in the building at the Texas School Book Depository. There were a lot of people spotted in the building. The place was full of employees. He was spotted outside the building. A lot of people were outside the building. He happened to be in the vicinity. There was a gun that was supposedly his, and maybe it was. And I will say that is very strong. It's something really to think about and consider. But the idea of saying that just because his rifle was there, if it was his rifle, and just because it was used to kill Kennedy, if it was used to kill Kennedy, that ain't sufficient to say that Lee Harvey Oswald did it. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
That rifle wasn't the same that sold at that
Go ahead.
The conspiracy starts here in the College complex. When you have a speaker speaking on a subject like this, the guy that arranged the speaker, that's Charles Paydock, he should have opposite debater. Now, there's no way that we can get here and intelligently rebut what the speaker said. Now, the speaker is a good speaker. In fact, I'm surprised he didn't get his PhD in speaking because he's good at that. However, listen, I was a grown man of a sound mind when this happened. I don't have to wait 50 years later or 40 years later for somebody working on a master's degree to come up and say, oh, this happened and that happened, that happened. I was on the top of it when it first started. I was a distribution clerk at the post office. If Time magazine came through, or the Brutal film on Life magazine came through, I read it before the owner did because it came through the post office. I always wanted to know the facts. That's all that interested me, the facts. Now, how do you figure out something or come to a conclusion as an individual in a manner and at a level that satisfies yourself? You do this with an open mind, and you follow what investigators are supposed. If you're investigating or critiquing, what you're supposed to follow. First of all, we quote Rene Descartes, this French philosopher. He said you start with the simple, and secondly, you start with what you know, and you will end up closer to what you're looking for. Those are my words, not quotes. Now, when this started to happen, it's an interesting event. And every television, every commentator, every radio, newspaper was writing about it. I'm reading this. I have to have confidence in my effort to get to the truth. I wasn't there, so I got to check and compare all of these things that I just mentioned. Now, a lot of things you can conclude by what is not done. In other words, if a pattern should be there and it's not there, that's circumstantial evidence. If it's should have been a pattern and nothing there, it's circumstantial. Or if it's a pattern, it's circumstantial evidence. Now, if some crackpot shoot the president, why does this official commission that they set up to investigate it want secrets? They put over half of the stuff in the libraries or wherever they are in Washington, D.C. and made it where you couldn't even see it. If a crackpot did this, he committed a crime, and what's all this secret about? Because if he a crackpot, it wasn't no conspiracy, it wasn't high level, then you put that on television, you put that everywhere, and you said you read this, you read that. Now, get back to where I stand on this, and obviously I don't stand that Oswald acted alone and that there was only 2 or 3 shots. I cannot accept it for the simple reason of this, like I said, the circumstantial evidence, number one. If it was nothing, then they're supposed to treat it like it's nothing. Now, you got all kinds of sides to this. Now, I read books like Harold Weisberg, Fight Watch 1, 2, and 3. I read the condensed version of the Warren Commission report. If you remember, they condensed it down to one volume. Now, I read Mark Lane, Rush to Judgment. Guess what? 90% of their book was critiquing the Warren Commission investigation. Harold Weisberg and Mark Lane. I'm reading this, and I'm saying, Jesus Christ, the guy is saying about the commission what I'm saying about the commission, because I read the commission report. I mean, it was the stuff in the commission report, or should have been there, wasn't there. Okay.
All right. He was there.
Did you fill it out, baby? Just this one I need filled out.
Speak loud and speak clearly.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Diane Cantonin. I'm interested in this, but also just like any common person, from a patriotic point of view also, because I sort of like to think that we as a country have sort of, as they say, we're unique in the world, or we used to be anyway. So I'm sort of come from that. I was in the 10th grade when this happened, and like he said, all of the coverage, going back though to a person who's been maligned here today would be Jim Garrison. I want to say that he wrote a book in '70 called Heritage of Stone. Then he wrote a fiction book because I guess he needed money, but he wrote a fiction book called Star Spangled Contract. Then he wrote another book in '91-ish, and that was On the Trail of the Assassins, at which point in time Oliver Stone went to visit him to do the movie, and this was an article, I think, in Esquire or wherever I read it. Stone's story is the story on Stone is Stone went to visit Garrison to get his consent about the movie. Garrison, being an intelligent person and having been through a mill already over the years, it was about 92, he didn't mind meeting with Stone, but he saw Stone's attitude was a typical Hollywood 60s mentality, hotshot kind of guy who threw out right away Carlos Marcello's name or something, and right away, and this was the conversation, I don't know, Marcello from Gincana and all of these guys, I mean, it's just too much. However, his response to this cocky Oliver Stone at the time, at their first interview, was, well, why don't you go up north where Carlos Marcello is in jail and do a movie on him? And this meeting is over. And in the Southern gentleman way, which I would say, he walked away from it and thanked him for coming or whatever. Then he clamored to go and meet him again, hence the movie was made. Okay, now that movie throws out a lot of things. I saw it. I thought it was interesting because it leaves things nebulously for people to kind of, like he did, or the young man, to figure out our own truth, see? So anyway, there are many, many things. Witnesses, this Jean Hill, when she was first witnessed, she was in that real-time version that I saw the other day. Frank McGee was on the phone, right away from Dallas. Okay, so this is in the early moments, not long after 12:30-ish or whatever. One of the witnesses, Jean Hill, was one of them. She was saying she looked over and saw these men running from the grassy knoll area. Now here's my theory, that Mauser thing, when it came up later, when early on they said about a 303 British, whatever. They found it, the police did, is what McGee and these guys are saying. Then they went later on to Dallas, to Washington, there's David Brinkley, and he said, well, we have some word on a rifle that they found. They were getting bits and pieces, learning as we were learning. You see, real time, just as if you're watching it. So, and he says, they found a rifle, they sent it to the FBI, it was a Mauser. No fingerprints were on it, however, they sent it to the FBI. And that was just a little bit of news among the many, many scraps and bits of news going on as they were going on, and we are all learning as we go, trying to figure things out. Now I want to say, sir, the Payne, Michael Payne and Ruth Payne, big conspiracy. You talked about cunning. Lee Harvey Oswald, I think, was a dupe and a patsy. Not dumb, I agree, but young, 23 years old, idealistic. He was interviewed by a station in New Orleans, and in that interview he said, well, I would call myself a communist, but more, I'm not a communist, but a Marxist. And then he said, why did you do the Fair Play for Cuba thing? Well, I thought Cuba should open for tourism and things like that. And that's what he said. He was talking about, so there might be some connection in the way where he was saying about the underworld sort of, maybe is paid off by somebody at one point in time by somebody, or do this. Maybe he thought he was with something. Somebody owned him, in my view. But why did, when he went to Russia in '59 and he came back in a couple of years and he wanted to come back, and I guess he got $400 from the embassy to come back, he, right away, the Russian community got next to him. Marina knew no English. And anything. Okay, well, okay, I'm done for now.
Thank you, sir. Well, it's good to be back with you folks again at the college after considerable absence.
Hey, Brad.
And I'd like to thank Dr. Franklin for what I think is a very succinct and lucid and reasonable explanation of what happened, with which I completely agree. almost to exact detail.
Can you speak into the microphone a little more?
Yeah, sure, I'm sorry. Now, in regard to Oswald's motivation, it seems to me that he traveled in circles in which there are good reason for many people to hate President Kennedy. I mean, Oswald himself claimed to be a Marxist, and many Marxists would not have liked the way Kennedy handled the Cuban Missile Crisis and Kennedy's stand in general initially regarding the Cold War. They would have disliked President Kennedy very much and might have recommended assassinating him because of that. The circles in which he moved in the Cuban community, there were many people there who believed in assassination too and hated President Kennedy, and these people would have been arguing for assassination. So I don't see any, I would think Oswald would have in his mind very easily reasons why he would hate President Kennedy and like to see him killed. At least he would dislike President Kennedy, and he would know that many of his friends wanted Kennedy killed. Now, second, the type of training that Oswald had, when you go into the Marine Corps, you go into an environment where people think in black and white, as I understand it. It's like the CIA and these other semi-military and military organizations. In regard to your friends, fine, they're your comrades and what have you. In regard to your enemies, you kill them. It's quite simple, and you become very expert at knowing how to kill them. In the Marine Corps, he was trained to be a marksman. How to use a rifle very skillfully, and he was a good marksman. He was trained to be a sniper, and sniping is one of the major activities of infantrymen now in the military. This is how, to a great extent, wars are fought now, by sniping at long range with high-powered, very accurate weapons. So he had that training. Later, I understand he went off to Japan and worked with a CIA agent there that was operating these spy planes, and this type of mentality also fits into that. So it seems to me that he's very clearly the kind of person who, when he finds himself in Dallas in this right-wing community, would find it very reasonable to think about killing President Kennedy, and he would have the knowledge and skill of how to do it very, very easily with a rifle, which he could obtain in our culture very, very simply by a mail-order rifle for $19 sent to somebody who gave a false name. Now, this brings me to the last point I'd like to make. I've heard people say, well, how? It's impossible that in our society that a person would go out and shoot a president of the United States. How could that possibly happen? You know, it doesn't surprise me at all in the United States that anybody goes out and shoots anybody else. We have a continual series of mass murders and assassinations going on with high-powered weapons in our society, carried out by people who are obviously emotionally unbalanced in some ways, have strange political ideas, can easily gain access to these weapons and the occasion for using them, and go out and do it. And we get these slaughters here and there. Why is it therefore strange that some individual with a disturbed and with many violent incidences in his background would obtain a high-powered rifle and shoot a president? It doesn't surprise me at all. And it will not surprise me at all if this continues to happen. I think the security agents are much more careful to try to protect presidents from this type of event, but in the long run, they're not going to be able practically to prevent it from happening again, or people making this type of attempt. I think we have to look at the violent nature of our society and the ready access to high-powered weapons by everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, and thank you to our speaker, Dr. Franklin. I think it was an excellent presentation of the lone gunman theory, and I appreciate the fact that everything was very reasonable in what he said, except that he denigrated some of the witnesses that have come forward. Now, I did mention about Sandra Stiles Butler and Vicki Adams, that they did not see Oswald in the stairway, but they also didn't bring up that they saw someone else, which leads to that someone actually must have fired shots from that sixth floor, and of course Oswald. It seems almost incontrovertible that he did bring the rifle to the schoolbook depository. So it is clear he was in on something, or he was a lone gunman, or well, at any rate, he did talk about the curtain rods. That was obviously a ruse, and he must have either known that he was going to end up being a patsy if he had been convinced by somebody that he should either take some shots from the sixth floor. So he was in on it. But there does seem to be a good deal of evidence from people that did see a possible second shooter from behind that fence on the grassy knoll. And one of them was a Lee Bowers, who said that he saw two people behind that picket fence, and that he saw a puff of smoke, flash of light. And Jim Mars, who was mentioned as a writer by our friend Mr. Anderson at the beginning of at the announcement time of the presentation, he actually did a stage situation where someone used a replica of this Mannlicher Carbino rifle that, and it was clear that you could see puffs of smoke from shooting from that exact spot. So this guy, Lee Bowers, was killed in a car accident 6 months after testimony to the Warren Commission, which they ignored. So this is very suspicious. There's extremely suspicious circumstances. I don't have a list of all the people that were murdered or died under suspicious circumstances. Lee Bowers, this is very serious testimony of a second shooter, and he was killed by a car that rammed his car off the road into a concrete barrier of some kind. It was a black car, similar to the cars we've heard about, like these infamous black helicopters. We have black cars that agents use when they're going about their nefarious, government agents especially use when they're going about nefarious activities. So the suspicions also that have been brought up by Jeff, and which independently I've had all my life since I studied this assassination myself, of what was going through the Secret Service, that they simply let the president be killed and did nothing about it. And now I'm told it's 8 seconds. We used to think it was 6 seconds. It's 8.5 seconds from the first shot to the shot that actually killed Kennedy. Now, it's a unique set of circumstances. It's amazing. It wasn't even brought up about the fact that he had a brace, because Kennedy had all of these ailments, and one of them was to do with his back, and so he had this brace, which actually was to keep him sitting up straight so he wouldn't keel over or something during the motorcade. That would not look cool. He got to look cool, and so this brace actually might have caused him to stay straight up after the first shot hit him. If he'd have just fallen over, and why Jackie didn't pull him down, nobody actually had any clue of, hey, maybe Jackie's sitting next to him in these motorcades. I don't know how many he did, but if there's a shot fired, pull your hubby down next to you and get down yourself. And what about the guy who was driving the car? Something should have gotten through to his little skull about evasive action if you hear a gunshot. Or if the president actually is hit, and you know he's hit, and you hear noises of a second person being hit. Actually, I have a little extra time because Charlie Paydock said he would defer his time to me. But anyway, the Secret Service, this is not simply incompetence. This is almost, it verges on the fact that they wanted Kennedy to be killed. It's crazy that you have a driver, doesn't take any evasive action in 8 seconds, doesn't speed the car up, doesn't zigzag the car. It's nuts.
Okay. All right.
Guess what? No, it's Jeff or somebody else ready. I'm just kind of warming the chair.
I'll go next. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Just keeping the chair.
All right, we got Dick.
Okay, Tim, you want to give up a speech?
Yes.
All right, go ahead. I'll time you, okay? Don't worry, I'll be fair.
To me, it is irrelevant about who killed Kennedy as it is about who shot JR. To me, the real legacy of Kennedy, what we really need to remember, are those immortal words that he said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." I find it very fascinating tonight that we still obsess over his murder and his assassin. And what we're not really taking a look at is his legacy as a leader. Starting the civil rights movement, his inevitable rise with dealing with the Russians and Khrushchev, eventually leading to that other resounding words done by Mr. Ronald Reagan, and I quote, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Kennedy to me represents a lot of what is great about this country. The spirit of innovation, the spirit of getting together to solve common problems, and the spirit of service and of taking on a new challenge, such as also what he said in his presidency. "We shall send a man to the moon and back within this decade." Why? Not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And guess what? We did it.
Not like you.
Perhaps if we learn a little, obsessed more about his legacy, about how he was able to be an effective leader and get the country back on track, and maybe have some of our legislatures follow in that same spirit of service, we might be back on track. No, I don't worry about his death or his assassination, but I worry about what he did in life and the legacy that he had represented to bring this country to greatness. After all, he did do one of the largest tax cuts in history. He did do a number of other things, including the getting of the Civil Rights Acts done, and with his predecessor, Lyndon Johnson, in his war on poverty and other landmark legislation that really brought this country into a world leadership position. No, I don't care who killed Kennedy. I like his legacy and his life. Thank you.
Couldn't he have done more anyway?
How about McCarthy? You leave McCarthy.
Okay, go ahead, Joe.
He's a good guy.
I'm a scientist, and I would like to make a distinction between hypothesis and theory. An hypothesis is an idea that's put out there for the purpose of developing experiments and developing facts. A theory is something that is backed up by the facts. You don't change the facts. You don't put the theory first and then fit the facts to it. A theory is the development of the facts that corroborates your theory. Hypothesis is the opposite. It's an idea you put out there and then you develop facts to substantiate it. If you do substantiate it, it becomes a theory. Second, one of our speakers mentioned the Cuban Missile Crisis and Kennedy's role in that. I do want to make the point that Kennedy, quote, negotiated the removal of the capability of sending missiles from Cuba toward the United States. What is very often not talked about is the fact that in the negotiations, the United States, Kennedy, agreed to remove 1,500 medium-range missiles from the Turkish-Russian border, and that's a very important thing. The third thing I wanted to point out is that although he was a very young child, I suspected Charlie actually shot Kennedy.
My name is Andy Anderson. My brother and I run what's called the Northwest Information Service out in Palatine, and our hobby, when we have time away from work, we collect and translate books on blacked out subjects, things that reporters can get fired for writing about in America. For the last 37 years, Project Censored, I mentioned these two are the latest, 2013, 2014. Have you ever read a copy of this? Anyone? This is the single most blacked out book in America. It's a nationwide bestseller every year. There's never any write-ups in the papers. Barnes & Noble carries it. They usually stock it. They give you the top 25 stories of the year that were reported somewhere, but then the major media just ran a coordinated blackout. The media, since the Kennedy assassination, the media has been shaping and molding public opinion in America, and those books describe the concept. It's a two-step process, two-pronged process. If you're going to teach the earth is flat, well, you have the earth is flat on all channels, and then you black out Albert Einstein and 500 of his friends from the physics department saying, Mr. President, the earth isn't flat. We got pictures on the space shuttle. What are you going to do with Albert and his friends? You run a coordinated blackout if you have control of the media. And the billionaire predators that run this country have control of all the major media. So it's not surprising that certain kinds of books get published promoting official theories. Liam Sheff wrote this book, and it published in 2011. It's called Official Stories, right? Official stories exist to protect officials. They give you the official story of the Kennedy assassination and what really happened. The official story of 9/11, what really happened. The official story of several other murders, what really happened. Michael David Morrissey, I mentioned earlier, wrote this book called The Transparent Conspiracy. In America, if they wanted to get rid of Kennedy and just, put another president in, if it wasn't a big deal, they would have poisoned his coffee or something at night. But they had to do it in broad daylight to send a message to whoever might want to investigate. We murdered this man in broad daylight, and we left you clues that are patently impossible. Transparent conspiracies are meant to send a message to the people that, not the masses. The masses of the people are still living under the bubble of illusion. But it's the people that want to investigate. When they start to investigate, they say, oh, well, maybe if I poke into this, I could get killed. Because the official story is a total crock, a fairy tale. Eric Larson published this book. It's mostly essays about the media. It's called The Skull of Yorick. The Skull of Yorick is a famous empty skull out of Hamlet, where they're looking for knowledge. At any rate, is my time almost up yet? No. Give me about 2 more minutes. I thought we had 5 minutes apiece.
No more than 1 minute.
Okay. A whole bunch of people are acting as gatekeepers in this country to keep the public from finding out what's really happening. So if you want to know, don't work with books that are 4 or 5 years old on the Kennedy assassination and promote the official story. Look to these 4 new ones that have the newly released information. This one is from Jesse Ventura called They Killed Our President. 363 reasons to believe there was a conspiracy. The book is dedicated to Gerald Posner, Vincent Bugliosi, and Bill O'Reilly. He says you need to read this book and learn what the modern facts are. And finally, I'll mention these 2 really quick because they are loaded with forensic evidence that totally disproves the theory, the fairy tale Lee Harvey Oswald. One is called Crossfire by Jim Marrs. It's a revised and updated edition that's loaded. And this one is The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination by Lamar Waldron. I'll have more, anybody who wants to come get information from me at the end, come over there in the back.
All right, now listen, time is running out. I had to recalculate because we had more rebuttal speakers than I thought. So it's going to be 4 minutes apiece from now on. And unfortunately, that will also include, okay, go.
There's me and who else?
Oh.
Okay,
3 minutes,
look.
hurry up.
All right. Yeah, if you can lend me a minute, Chuck, and you only have 3, I'd appreciate it.
I think we have enough time for 4 minutes apiece.
If he gives me one of his 4, then I'll have 5 and he'll have 3. Okay, anyhow.
You've already wasted 15 seconds.
Look, folks, I was in the security law enforcement biz, and there's something of a family history with this. And we've got different ways of thinking about this, evidently, than everybody else. What looks like in this debate, there's a spurious dichotomy between the conspiracy theorists with a capital C on the one hand, and the establishment, or whatever you want to call them, types on the other. And I'm suggesting another way of looking at it. For all we know, if Oswald had missed every single shot, there might have been 2 or 20 dudes at the Trade Mart waiting for Jack Kennedy. And eventually, one of them was going to hit target. And they were going to hit target because the security apparatus took the day off. Now, the prior day he was in San Antone, and it was a totally different ball game. According to this here Palomero guy, who I brought to your attention, if I'm remembering his name right, there was, among other things, a police helicopter above Jack Kennedy's motorcade in that city. So something happened, is my sense of it is, between San Antone on Thursday and Dallas on Friday. What the hell it was, I don't know. But I'll wager you this. Whatever folks decided, whatever they decided to change the security arrangement from the one day to the next, I think there's a damn good chance none of them had ever heard of Oswald. All right? And likewise with Jack Ruby, with respect to your reasonable question in the first instance about, well, gee, they could have knocked off Ruby with poison in the jail or something. Well, that assumes that the folks who had control of the basement that morning had access to the jail. And that may or may not be the case. There's no telling how these things work in these bureaucracies. But the thrust of my questions to the speaker was that both of these events were unprecedented in the way they happened. In both cases, the barn door was left wide open, and when you leave the barn door open, you don't give a damn if it's Oswald or Ruby or Jack the Ripper who strolls on in and steals the horses, as long as the horses get stolen. Jack Kennedy is quoted, as saying, before this happened to him, that if a guy wants to trade his life for mine, there's only so much the Secret Service can do. He was talking about a face-to-face job. And indeed, the split-second reactions. Here, Jackie, she didn't have her head together enough to zoom and grab him and throw him to the floor. Well, stuff like that happens. But what my questions showed, and the fact that the speaker couldn't think of any counterexamples, somebody brought up Philip of Macedon as someone who was killed by some sort of sniper type thing. Well, guess what, folks? That guy was killed by a conspiracy. A total of 3 dudes were offed for the crime. That's a conspiracy. All right, this is how this stuff goes. And the media, of course, they just sat and they swallowed the Ruby story. After all, Ruby just strolled on in and did his thing, and they just told the rest of the world, well, okay, I guess that's it. Virtually nobody ever asked any kind of questions to speak of about the performance of the security apparatuses in those 2 events, and therefore those 2 events were the biggest jokes in the history of security in the world.
Okay. Let me just say, I think Jack Ruby had access to the police department because he was paying off the cops so regularly that he was used to being in the Dallas police department. But I'm really here to talk about there's some misconception that Oswald wasn't a good shot. In the Marine Corps, you have a 200, 300, and 500 yard ranges that you have to qualify for. Now, he qualified. The qualifications at the lowest are marksman, sharpshooter, and expert. He was a sharpshooter. Not only did he qualify, but he qualified at sharpshooter. to be an expert, there's very little leeway in missing anything. So he was a good shot, so I just want to put that to bed. In addition to that, he didn't shoot with a scope on that range. He shot without a scope. So he had to know windage and elevation on any weapon that he had. He had to know what's called the dope on the weapon. The other thing I want to rebut or talk about the legacy of Kennedy before we get all lovey-dovey about John Kennedy. Let's not forget his involvement with the McCarthy's un-American activities. He was on that committee, accusing people and blacklisting people and ruining their lives. He also is the first president to use Agent Orange in Vietnam. And I think his famous quote about what you can do for your country, not don't ask what your country can do for you, should be just the other way around. Let's start asking what our country can do for us, because they're not doing a whole lot. So I don't think much of John Kennedy's legacy. Thank you.
Where we going? Oh, all right. I'll be very quick. Let's thank our speaker once again. I just want to say for about at least 25 years, I do all day long, I read investigations of things that allegedly took place in at least the workplace. And I have to comment on investigations, their thoroughness. I've even given testimony in Congress on this issue. There's a thing called harmful error, in which you basically don't do it properly and arrive at improper conclusions. And we establish that all the time. This is one of the poorest investigations. It's simply a serious matter. You're falling apart here. You put this criteria, I'm trying to think of the other term, on witnesses didn't come forward. Let me tell you, if you think you can get, just witnesses wherever you feel like? I mean, do you know what goes into getting witnesses or getting them to testify and be credible? It's just next to impossible on occasion. People are reluctant, they don't want to get involved. That criteria is, you establish that, there were no witnesses of this, therefore it did not take place. Is not substantiated by reality. I'm often reminded of this thing about him. You mentioned the photograph of Oswald in the backyard, and I remember I represent Federal Protective Services, and there was one of our stewards who had a picture in his backyard with his guns and stuff. Yeah. I've seen that thing around here. And last of all, I wanted to say regarding the rifle, from what I understand, if you went to that company and tried to purchase one of those rifles, guess what? You got something different in the mail than Oswald allegedly had. So, and if you raise doubt on these things, that's what I mean. You've got to have your act together if you're going to get in this serious business. These are supposedly law enforcement.
Director who was dealing with the CIA, he was all together while she was with Sam Giancana, she was with him. So all these things get a lot of enemies. And now people are painting him as though he is like a saint. And so I think that people just need to look at the facts. The facts is that cheated on his wife, he was involved with Marilyn Monroe on the evening itself. Then he had dealings with the CIA and the mob. So it's not really, this is a guy who did a lot of things and created a lot of enemies. So, that's all I gotta say. I don't think people should be deifying him. That's all.
All right. Susan.
5 minutes to
Well, no, wait a second. We have the speaker needs to talk. Do you want to talk after the speaker?
Just 1 second.
Okay, go after the speaker. All right, now, first of all, just hold on a minute. Does anybody else want to give a rebuttal speech?
No time.
Okay.
Don't have time.
All right. Let me speak real quick, and I'm not going to take a long time. But first of all, I wanted to respond to what this gentleman says, and also the whole statement about the Kennedy assassination. Does it matter who killed John F. Kennedy? Well, I would say yes, it does. I would say that if it didn't, I don't think we'd be here tonight. I don't think this presentation would be going on. I think the fact that we've had so many people come here tonight shows people do care. Tim Bolger compared it to the, who shot J.R.? Well, there is no comparison because J.R. Ewing was a fictional character on television. John F. Kennedy was an actual president of the United States. Now, if John F. Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy, well, there's no statute of limitations on murder. And it wasn't, 50 years might seem like a long time ago, but as our speaker pointed out, the man who was escorting Lee Harvey Oswald is still alive. So it really wasn't that long ago. There are plenty of people here who remember when Kennedy was killed. And it's not the same thing as the other presidential assassinations. And the reason, if you think of the other presidential assassinations, Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley, in each case, we got all these witnesses who watched the guy pull out a handgun and shoot the president up close. And in this case, what do we actually see? We see Kennedy getting shot by a rifle shot, and we don't know who fired it. We may suppose that it was Lee Harvey Oswald, but we don't really know. And there was never a trial of Oswald because he was killed. So it remains an unsolved mystery, and it hangs over us like a specter. And I believe that as long as this remains unsolved, I think that we, as Americans, have a moral obligation to solve this mystery, or to do what we can to solve it, and to find those who are responsible, if they are still alive, and bring them to justice. Okay.
Speaker gets the final word.
Where can I get a sweater like that?
No personal attacks, Charlie.
About 3 minutes for a piece I have coming out in about a week and a half. By the way, you're all very good sports. Thank you very much. You're all very good sports. Anyone under 50 today must harbor at least some cynicism about the current obsession with 11/22/63, the day of the assassination. Unlike much of what is written about the time, in this case it's not simply another case of baby boomer self-indulgence. The day is critical to understanding American history. No other day in the 20th century, except possibly Pearl Harbor Day, December 7, 1941, marked a greater transition in American society than November 22nd. Politically, the shots in Dallas ended President Kennedy's new frontier and ushered in Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. Kennedy's death created a brief moment of bipartisanship that would be envied today. It was marked by passage of the Civil Rights Bill of 1964, followed by the other anti-discrimination legislation highlighted by the Voting Rights Bill of 1965. At the same time, the assassination resulted in a period of nearly unparalleled Democratic Party ascendance. This included LBJ's landslide over Goldwater in the '64 election, accompanied by Democratic supermajorities in both houses of Congress. Like today, some foresaw the end of the Republican Party. However, soon names foreign to most Americans on 11/22/63 entered the American lexicon. Vietnam, Gulf of Tonkin, Ho Chi Minh. By 1968, the Republicans, specifically JFK's primal enemy, Richard Nixon, had recaptured the White House, and the Democrats were the party in disarray. November 22nd also changed the popular culture. Two of the century's greatest writers, Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World, and C.S. Lewis, who wrote Chronicles of Narnia, died on that day, and their deaths went virtually unnoticed. A year before, on a tense night in October 1962, the night of the JFK's Cuban Missile Crisis speech, a 27-year-old named Vaughn Meader recorded The First Family, a comedy album based on his impersonation of John Kennedy. It sold over 6 million copies in its first 6 weeks, at the time the best-selling album ever, and made Meader almost as popular as the man he imitated. Imagine a star's career ending instantly in one afternoon through no fault of his own. But on November 22nd, Meader became the visible reminder of something no one wanted to remember. That was it, he recalled. 1 year, November to November. Then boom, it was all over. Meanwhile, another popular avant-garde comic, Lenny Bruce, took note of Meader's plight. Bruce took the Carnegie Hall stage that night, and after a mock respectful silence opened, "Man, Van Meter's fucked." Bruce was unaware his own career was also nearly finished. Besieged by legal problems for ascending on stage, the controversial Bruce turned to the assassination for material in his act. Suddenly, no one found him funny. Less than 3 years after the evening that he ridiculed Vaughn Meader at Carnegie Hall, Lenny Bruce was dead of a drug overdose. Vaughn Meader and Lenny Bruce, once household names, nearly forgotten today. 10 weeks after the assassination, the Beatles debuted on American television. Their instant popularity in the United States has been attributed in part as a response to lingering national grief. Whether true or not, they immediately transformed American music. Folk music and jazz, popular trends since the 50s, were suddenly passé. Folk singers and jazz musicians scurried for rock and roll gigs. Jimmy Buffett later observed in a song it was an era when only jazz musicians were smoking marijuana, a soon-to-be mainstream trend. American rock and rollers who once topped the charts faded rapidly into obscurity as the Beatles and their British contemporaries took over. However, two legendary American rockers were deeply affected by November 22, 1963. That afternoon, legendary producer Phil Spector released his revolutionary concept album, A Christmas Gift for You from Phil Spector, featuring black female singers singing Christmas songs with his signature arrangements. Not surprisingly, considering the release date, it flopped commercially. Now it's songs like the Ronettes' Sleigh Ride and Darling Love's White Christmas are Christmas standards. Today, if Phil Spector hears them at all, if he hears his rediscovered masterpiece, it's from jail. And on the night on the west coast of the assassination, a disconsolate Brian Wilson, leader of the Beach Boys, was moved to write a song different from his usual cars and surfing fare. It was the saddest song he ever composed. A wistful ballad never a hit. It was called The Warmth of the Sun, about a boy who loses the love of my life and finds solace in the California sun. The migration by young people to California had already begun, and they received the advice to wear flowers in your hair. But some of their contemporaries were soon farther west to fight and die in the jungles of Southeast Asia. The observation that sums up this historic day better than any occurred when Washington Post columnist and Kennedy family friend Mary McGrory remarked to cabinet official Daniel Patrick Moynihan that she felt like we'd never laugh again. Moynihan's prescient reply was that we'll laugh again, it's just that we'll never be young again. Thank you all very much.
All right, Susan.
Very good.
Susan, get her minute.
This is my laptop.
Susan, you get your minute.
Hey.
Go out the front door.
Wait, Susan.
My laptop.
I just want everybody to have a wonderful holiday, and thank you very, very much for your cooperation tonight. I know it was a little bit noisy over there. We really appreciate it, and if there's any way I could get everybody to exit out of the front door, I'd be very grateful. Thank you. Have a nice holiday.
Apparently no problem.